It was just supposed to be a simple birthday celebration. Dolores Thompson, an 81-year-old woman, set off to buy herself a gift in Paris, a place she had always dreamed of visiting. After years of sacrifice, putting others first and living humbly, today was meant to be a moment of joy, a well-deserved treat. But what happened next would ignite a fire in her son, Michael Jordan, that would change not only her life, but also the entire luxury industry. No one could have anticipated how one rejection would lead to a global movement, inspiring millions around the world. Dolores Thompson's rejection at a luxury store. It was supposed to be a simple moment, a rare moment of self-celebration. Dolores Thompson, at 81 years old, had lived a life defined by sacrifice, by putting others' needs ahead of her own. As a single mother, she had worked tirelessly to raise 3 children, often taking on multiple jobs just to ensure they had enough to eat and a roof over their heads. She had given everything she had, poured her heart and soul into her family, and when her children were finally able to stand on their own, Dolores thought she had earned the right to treat herself for once. It was her birthday, her 81st, and Dolores had always dreamed of being in Paris, standing in front of the kind of shop that graced the pages of magazines, the kind of store where the world's wealthiest walked through the doors. Today, she decided, she would buy herself something. A small gift, nothing extravagant, just a token to honor the decades of hard work she had put into raising her family. A silk scarf, maybe, or a delicate pair of gloves. As she stood before La Maison Renard, the luxury store gleaming with opulence, Dolores couldn't help but feel a flutter in her chest. She had saved for this day, her dream finally within reach. She didn't expect to be treated like royalty. She didn't need diamonds or expensive shoes, just something small to mark the occasion. She was a woman who had survived much, a woman who had raised her children with nothing but determination and love, and yet, at this moment, she felt vulnerable, out of place. The doorman, a tall man with piercing eyes and a polished demeanor, greeted a well-dressed couple who approached the door. He bowed deeply, welcoming them inside with warmth and respect. Dolores watched them pass by, their clothes dripping with the symbols of wealth, and then she stepped forward. But when she reached the doorman's smile vanished. He looked her over. Her simple black pants, the sensible shoes that had carried her through countless days of hard work, and then his eyes narrowed. Without a word, he stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "I'm sorry, madam, but we're closed for a private event today," he said, his voice cold. Dolores blinked, her heart sinking. She had just watched a couple, no different than herself, walk right past him into the store. "But they just went inside," she said, her voice cracking slightly. His gaze hardened. "They are on the guest list. You are not." The words felt like a punch to her stomach. She stood there, stunned, as the doorman's gaze swept over her once more. This time with disdain, as though she didn't belong in this world of luxury and exclusivity. She wasn't the type of person this store catered to. In his eyes, she was invisible, unworthy. Dolores had faced many rejections in her life. She had known what it felt like to be dismissed because of her background, her appearance, the choices she had made in a world that too often valued superficial things over substance. But today, at 81, this rejection felt different. It wasn't just about being turned away from a store. It was a reminder of the doors that had always been shut in her face, the walls that had always been built to keep people like her out. She had never truly belonged in the world of privilege and luxury. A deep sadness settled in her chest, but Dolores refused to let it show. She straightened her back, forcing herself to hold her head high. She turned away and walked down the street, her heart heavy. As the first raindrop hit her cheek, she didn't hurry. There was nowhere to rush to, no more goals to accomplish, no more dreams to chase, just a quiet hotel room in Paris and a birthday that had been marred by the sting of rejection. But as Dolores walked through the rain, she thought about the many times in her life when she had been overlooked, dismissed, or told she didn't matter. It wasn't just about this one store or this one incident. It was the accumulation of a lifetime of being made to feel invisible because she didn't fit society's idea of worth. The rain didn't stop her tears. It only seemed to deepen them. But Dolores had always been resilient. She had survived so much worse. This moment, painful as it was, would not break her. It wasn't just a luxury store that had rejected her. It was a world that didn't see her, that didn't appreciate what she had built. And yet, as she walked away from that door, her determination grew stronger. She had faced prejudice before, and she would face it again. But one thing was for certain: no one would ever take away her strength, her dignity, or the love she had given to her family. Not today. Not ever. Michael Jordan's emotional response. As Michael Jordan sat in his office in Chicago, immersed in his usual business dealings, he had no idea that a simple phone call from his mother would shatter his focus. Michael had long been accustomed to the demands of his career: basketball, investments, endorsements, and philanthropy. But no matter how busy he became, his mother Dolores always had a special place in his heart. After all, she was the woman who had shaped him, who had given up everything to raise him and his siblings. She was the cornerstone of his life, the one who had taught him that strength came not from money or status, but from resilience, determination, and love. When his phone rang that evening, Michael's heart warmed at the sight of Dolores's name on the screen. He knew it was late in Paris, but he always made time for her, no matter what. He answered with a cheerful voice, eager to hear her thoughts on the city, her birthday, and the celebrations she might have planned. But when he heard her voice, something felt off. It wasn't the usual warm tone he was used to. There was something fragile, something lost. "Hey, Mom, how's everything?" he asked, his voice light, trying to lift her spirits, not yet knowing the storm brewing on the other side of the world. Dolores responded with a forced smile in her voice. "It's fine, sweetheart, I'm just dealing with a little rain." She tried to laugh, but the sound was hollow, as if she was trying to mask something deeper. Michael's instincts immediately told him something was wrong. "What happened, Mom?" he asked, his tone shifting to one of genuine concern. Dolores hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly told him the story. She spoke about the rejection she had faced outside La Maison Renard, the luxury store in Paris. She described how the doorman, Vincent, had blocked her entry with coldness and disdain, dismissing her based on her appearance and judging her worth by the clothes she wore. "I just wanted to buy something small for myself, a gift to mark my birthday," she explained quietly. Michael's heart sank as he listened to the details. His mother, a woman who had raised him with nothing but love and sacrifice, had been rejected because of her age, her appearance, and the simple fact that she wasn't dressed in the type of wealth that society deemed worthy. The injustice of it all hit him like a thunderclap. For a moment, Michael said nothing. He let the silence stretch between them, his mind racing as he processed what his mother had just told him. This was not just about a store. It was about the systemic barriers that people like his mother faced every day, simply because they didn't fit into society's narrow definition of worth. The store's rejection wasn't just a personal insult to Dolores. It was a reflection of the world that had long undervalued people who didn't conform to a certain image of success and luxury. Michael's mind was always sharp, his focus unwavering, but in this moment something deep inside him ignited. His mother's pain wasn't just a hurt he could sympathize with. It was a wound he felt in his own heart. This was not just about one doorman or one store. It was about everything his mother had endured throughout her life. The years of hard work, the sacrifices, the feeling of never quite being good enough, of always having to fight for a place at the table. It was about how the world had continuously overlooked her. With his voice now steady and calm, Michael spoke, his words controlled, but there was an undercurrent of something fierce, something unyielding. "Tell me exactly what happened, Mom," he asked, his tone firm but caring. He needed the details, needed to understand the full extent of the injustice. Dolores explained everything: the doorman's condescending attitude, the way he dismissed her as though she didn't belong, and the casual cruelty with which he suggested she shop at tourist stores. Michael's anger simmered beneath the surface. He knew his mother was strong, but hearing her voice crack as she relived the moment made his protective instincts rise to the surface. She had been more than just humiliated. She had been dehumanized, reduced to nothing more than her appearance, and Michael would not stand for that. No one treated his mother like that. No one. "Mom," he said after a long pause, his voice low, the calm before the storm. "What was the store's name again?" "Collier," Dolores replied, unsure of what he was planning. And the doorman's name? Michael asked, already pulling up his phone, ready to dig into whatever resources he had to get justice. Vincent, but Michael, please don't. I won't let this slide, Mom, Michael interrupted, his voice laced with determination. I promise you that. His promise was not just about avenging her pain, it was about correcting the larger societal wrongs that had allowed this kind of treatment to persist for so long. Michael wasn't a man known for backing down from a challenge. Whether it was on the basketball court or in the boardroom, when something mattered to him, he fought for it with everything he had. And in this moment, nothing mattered more than his mother's dignity. As the conversation shifted, Dolores tried to steer the focus away from the incident, trying to protect him from her own hurt. But Michael wasn't going to let it go. He would make sure that the world knew this was wrong. He would use his influence, his resources, and his unwavering commitment to right this injustice. Not for the sake of revenge, but because it was the right thing to do, and because, as his mother had taught him, true strength comes not from what you have, but from how you treat others. Before they hung up, Dolores could hear the fire in her son's voice. I love you, Mom. And don't worry, we're going to fix this. As she set the phone down, Dolores couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. She had raised him to be strong, to fight for what was right. And now, he was fighting for her. Michael's decision to take action. In the hours after his conversation with his mother, Michael Jordan's thoughts didn't rest. The rejection Dolores had faced in Paris was more than just a personal slight. It represented something much larger. As a man who had achieved more than most could ever dream of, Michael understood better than anyone the power that wealth, status, and appearance had in this world. But his success had never come from the kind of wealth that was flaunted through fancy clothes or luxurious brands. It had come from something deeper, from heart, from grit, and from the determination to push beyond the limitations that others tried to impose on him. What his mother had experienced, the humiliation, the coldness, the judgment, was something he had witnessed before, not just in his own life, but in the lives of so many others. It wasn't just about the store. It was about a system that judged people based on their looks, their clothes, their status, and not on their character, their story, or the incredible strength they had shown in their lives. Michael had always hated the elitism that permeated society, the way it made people feel small and unworthy. He knew his mother had lived through enough hardship, enough judgment, enough barriers, and now, at 81 years old, she was being made to feel invisible again, rejected not because of who she was, but because of what she wasn't. As the evening wore on, Michael's anger slowly transformed into something else, a deep, burning determination. He was no longer the young basketball star, driven to prove himself on the court. He was now a successful businessman, a father and a son, with a responsibility to protect those he loved, and to stand up against the wrongs in the world. And right now, what mattered more than anything else was that his mother, who had given him everything, had been made to feel less than. His mind worked fast. Michael had never been one to sit idly by when something needed to be done. He didn't just talk about change, he made it happen. If that meant shaking the very foundations of the luxury world, so be it. He had spent his life pushing boundaries, breaking records, and defying expectations. This was no different. Michael was a man who knew how to leverage his power, and now he was going to use it to right a wrong that had affected the woman who had shaped him into who he was. He picked up the phone and immediately started making calls. He reached out to his trusted business advisors, to his legal team, to his contacts across industries, trying to learn everything he could about La Maison Renard. The more he dug into the store, the more he realized that this wasn't just about a single store or a single doorman. It was about an entire system that had been built around exclusivity, a world where only the wealthy and privileged were allowed entry, where people like his mother didn't belong. Michael knew he couldn't change the world overnight, but he could start here, with this one act. He wanted to buy the building. The entire thing, the store, the space, the land, everything. Not just to take control of La Maison Renard, but to send a message to the world. The message was simple. Dignity is not for sale. It was a radical move, one that would send shockwaves through the industry, but Michael didn't care. He wasn't in this for the money. He wasn't doing it for fame or accolades. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do. He was doing it because his mother, at 81 years old, deserved better than to be treated like she didn't matter. As he worked late into the night making calls and arranging meetings, his determination only grew stronger. He wasn't just going to buy a store or make a statement. He was going to change the very culture of exclusivity that had allowed people to be treated like commodities, to be judged based on their external appearances rather than their worth as human beings. Michael had learned long ago that true greatness wasn't about winning games or stacking wealth. It was about using your platform to lift others, to break down the walls that kept people out. His mother had taught him that lesson, even when she hadn't realized she was teaching it. Now, it was his turn to show the world that luxury, respect, and dignity were not defined by price tags or labels, but by the way you treated others. As the night turned into morning, Michael didn't rest. He didn't allow himself to be distracted by the noise of the world. He knew what had to be done. This was bigger than his mother's rejection. It was about every person who had ever felt judged or rejected, every person who had ever been told they weren't enough because they didn't meet society's shallow standards. He was going to change that, starting with one store, and through that he would spark a shift, a movement, that would make people rethink what truly mattered in life. It wasn't about how much you spent or what you wore. It was about who you were. It was about the courage to stand up, the courage to walk through a door that others tried to shut, and the courage to make the world see you for who you really are. Michael Jordan was a man who never backed down from a challenge, and this time the challenge wasn't just about business, it was about justice. It was about ensuring that no one, least of all his mother, would ever again be made to feel less than because of their appearance or background. The impact on the store and employees. When Michael Jordan made the decision to purchase the building that housed La Maison Renard, the ripples of his actions were felt far beyond the boardrooms and luxury boutiques. The quiet, unsuspecting world inside the store had just been shaken to its core, and as the employees went about their day, they were completely unaware that their lives and the fabric of their workplace were about to change forever. Inside La Maison Renard, there was a subtle air of arrogance, cultivated over decades of catering to the elite. The staff moved with practiced precision, their smiles polite but detached, always looking over their shoulders to see who was walking through the door. Customers with a certain pedigree, those with an air of wealth and exclusivity, were welcomed with open arms. The rest, those who didn't fit into the carefully crafted image of wealth, were quietly disregarded, dismissed, or turned away, often without a second thought. When Dolores Thompson had been turned away by the doorman, Vincent, it was just another day in the luxury world of La Maison Renard. But what Vincent hadn't realized, what no one in that store had realized, was that this moment of exclusion, this act of judgment, was about to be the catalyst for something far bigger than any of them could have anticipated. Zara, a young employee at La Maison Renard, had watched the entire scene unfold outside the store's glass doors. She had seen how Dolores, dressed simply but neatly, was turned away with a dismissive gesture, all because she didn't fit the store's unspoken standard of wealth and appearance. But something about Dolores's dignity in that moment struck Zara deeply. There was no anger, no outburst, just quiet hurt and a resolve to walk away with her head held high. Zara had only been working at the store for a few months, and she had already witnessed the way certain customers were treated differently, depending on how they looked or how much they spent. But she had never witnessed such overt rejection, and it made her question everything she had been taught about the world she was now a part of. Her supervisor had instructed her to mind her section, to focus on the silk scarves she was folding, to turn a blind eye to the situation. But Zara couldn't forget Dolores's face. She couldn't shake the image of the woman who had been dismissed like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. Dolores wasn't just a customer, she was a mother. A woman who had lived through hardship and built a life with her own hands, and yet, in that moment, she had been made to feel as though she wasn't worthy of stepping inside a store. Zara's own heart ached for Dolores, but she also felt something else: guilt. She knew that she was complicit in this system of exclusion, that she, too, had played a role in upholding the idea that some people were worthy of luxury and others were not. But what could she do? She was just an employee, a young woman trying to make a living, trying to build a life in a world where people like Dolores didn't belong in the circles of wealth and fashion. That night, Zara went home troubled. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened and how powerless she had felt to intervene. But as the days passed, something began to stir inside her. She had seen the looks on the faces of customers who had been turned away, the subtle but harsh judgment in the eyes of her co-workers when someone didn't fit the image of what a proper customer should look like. She began to question why she accepted it all, why she had been so willing to conform to the unspoken rules that had been set before her. When news of the store's sale broke, it felt like a punch to the gut. The building, the very place where so many had been dismissed, had been sold to an unknown buyer. Rumors swirled about the identity of the new owner. Some said it was a wealthy Russian investor, others claimed it was a rival luxury brand. No one knew for sure, but Zara couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change in a way she hadn't imagined. The store's management had always insisted on keeping its exclusive, pristine image intact, turning away those who didn't fit into their world. But now, with the sale of the building, everything was uncertain. Was this the beginning of something new? A shift in the luxury world? Zara wasn't sure, but she began to feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the changes that were coming would make her workplace a place of inclusivity, a place where everyone, regardless of their appearance or background, was welcomed with the same respect and dignity. She wasn't the only one who had begun to wonder what the new ownership would bring. Her colleagues, too, whispered in hushed tones, speculating about the future. Some feared for their jobs, others saw it as a chance for change. Even Vincent, the doorman who had once dismissed Dolores, seemed uneasy. His smug sense of entitlement, the belief that he controlled who walked through those doors, was being undermined by something much larger than his own authority. As Zara folded another silk scarf, she couldn't help but think back to Dolores' face, to the quiet dignity with which she had carried herself despite being turned away. That moment had changed something in Zara. Something inside her had shifted. She no longer wanted to be a part of a system that judged people based on their wealth or appearance. She wanted to be part of a world where everyone, regardless of their status, was seen for who they truly were, not how much money they had. And then, one day, the new owner arrived. The store was buzzing with nervous energy, but Zara, in the midst of it all, felt a sense of quiet resolve. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but she knew one thing: things were about to change, and she was ready for it. A global movement for change. Michael Jordan had always understood the power of influence. As one of the most famous athletes in the world, he knew that when he made a decision, the ripple effects were far-reaching. But what he didn't anticipate was how his personal response to an act of injustice would spark something much larger. A global movement that would make people everywhere reconsider what luxury, respect, and dignity truly meant. When Michael purchased the building that housed La Maison Reynard, the luxury boutique that had turned his mother away, the world took notice. This wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a symbolic act, one that sent shockwaves through the fashion and luxury industries. The very idea that a man like Michael Jordan, a globally renowned athlete with a fortune that most could only dream of, would use his resources not for profit, but for something as profound as fairness and inclusion, caught the attention of millions. The message was clear. Luxury wasn't about exclusivity, it was about respect. Within days, whispers began to circulate among fashion insiders, journalists, and social media influencers. People began asking questions. Why had Michael bought the building? What did it mean for the future of high-end fashion? Was the industry about to undergo a radical shift? For many, the purchase was the first sign that the old guard of the luxury world, one that had long embraced exclusivity, snobbery, and a harsh judgment of people based on their appearances, was being upended. Michael's actions had illuminated the inherent flaws in a system that had long overlooked those without visible wealth or status. The story of Dolores Jordan's rejection and the fire that Michael had ignited in response quickly spread beyond fashion circles. It became a rallying cry for millions of people who had been made to feel like they didn't belong, who had faced prejudice or exclusion simply because they didn't fit into society's narrow definitions of worth. It wasn't just about a luxury store. It was about every person who had been dismissed, ignored, or judged by their clothes, their background, or their bank account. Michael had turned his mother's personal pain into a public declaration that no one should ever feel less than because of how they appeared. As the weeks passed, news outlets picked up on the story, and soon the public conversation was no longer just about Michael's actions, but about a fundamental shift in the luxury market. The response was overwhelming. People began calling for brands to embrace inclusivity and for businesses to recognize that their customers were not just their bank accounts, but real people with stories, dreams, and dignity. Fashion magazines, once known for their elitism, started to run stories highlighting the importance of diversity and the value of personal worth over material wealth. High-end brands, wary of the shifting tides, started to reassess their marketing strategies, moving away from exclusivity and embracing a broader, more inclusive vision. But it wasn't just the fashion industry that began to take notice. Michael's move ignited a broader conversation about societal values, about what truly defines success, beauty, and luxury. His stance had struck a chord with people from all walks of life, from the working-class individuals who had always been overlooked, to those who had felt excluded from circles of power and influence simply because they didn't fit the mold. The world was beginning to understand that true value didn't lie in what one wore, but in who they were as people, in the integrity of their character, and in the way they treated others. In Paris, Zara, the young employee who had witnessed Dolores's rejection, found herself caught up in the whirlwind of change. She had never imagined that something as simple as her decision to stand up for Dolores would resonate so deeply. But she soon realized that the shift wasn't just happening in the luxury boutiques. It was happening everywhere. She had watched as Michael's actions unfolded, and as she began to hear the stories of people across the world who had faced similar injustices, she realized something profound. The courage to challenge the status quo wasn't just about one individual's power. It was about a collective decision to reject the systems that kept people marginalized. It was clear that this was more than just a corporate transaction. It was a cultural awakening. Michael Jordan's decision had sparked a global movement, one that reached beyond the confines of the fashion industry and into the hearts of people everywhere. His simple yet powerful message was that everyone deserved dignity, that everyone should have a place in the world, regardless of how much they had or how they looked. No one should ever feel less than because they didn't fit an arbitrary standard of worth. This was the new luxury, a luxury of kindness, acceptance, and recognition. For Dolores Jordan, the impact of her son's actions went beyond anything she could have imagined. At 81, she had lived a life full of challenges and heartbreaks, but she had also known the strength that came from surviving those hardships. When she had been turned away from the store, she had felt small, forgotten. But now, through her son's determination, she saw the world beginning to change. What began as a personal affront to her dignity had become a global conversation about the importance of inclusivity, respect, and true luxury. Michael's fight was far from over. He knew that changing the world wouldn't happen overnight. But as the movement continued to grow, he realized that sometimes the most powerful changes began with one individual's willingness to stand up for what was right. And in this case, that individual was his mother, a woman who had spent her life fighting for others, and now, through her own pain, had sparked a revolution. The story of Dolores Thompson and Michael Jordan serves as a powerful reminder that true value is not found in the clothes we wear, the wealth we accumulate, or the judgments others place on us. It's about dignity, respect, and the strength to stand up for what is right. In a world that often judges people by appearances, Michael's decision to stand up for his mother and challenge the system of exclusivity shows us that we all have the power to make a difference. Whether it's a personal injustice or a broader societal issue, the courage to act can spark a change that resonates far beyond one individual. Let Dolores and Michael's story inspire you to reflect on the times when you've felt judged or dismissed, and how you can stand up for those who may not have a voice. It's a call to embrace a new kind of luxury, one that values character over appearance, kindness over exclusivity, and respect over wealth. If this story moved you, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future content. Let's continue this journey together and inspire each other to make the world a more inclusive, compassionate place. Comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced or witnessed a similar situation? How do you think we can create a more inclusive world where everyone feels valued? Your thoughts and feedback are always welcome. Let's start a conversation that can spark real change. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll be back to join us for more meaningful content.